Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Mindset Investor, where creating generational wealth requires 5% strategy and 95% mindset. So, before we go any further, I want to talk to you a little bit about thinking. I'm going to introduce the idea of thinking from a different perspective. Some of these ideas, or this idea that I'm going to introduce to you, may sound radical, may or may not sound radical, and some of the ideas are more scientific in nature. But we're going to put everything together, and then we'll be able to move on to further topics. But I'm going to start off with what I used to believe sounded radical to me. I'm going to start by quoting a Dr. Ken McFarland, who said 2% of the people think, 3% of the people think they think, and 95% of the people would rather die than think. Now, this may sound like a joke. I know that when I quote it to friends and other people, it makes people laugh. And I laughed when I heard it for the first time. But if somebody's telling something like this to you from a serious perspective, then you begin to think, well, what are you talking about? I mean, we're always thinking. I'm always thinking when I'm in the car. I'm thinking of what's going to happen later on, whether I'm going to get enough time to stop by the supermarket before going home, or when I'm thinking in the shower about what's going to happen later on, or what happened in the past. But this type of thinking is more of a habitual type of thinking. And here's another something that may or may not sound radical to you as well, but it turns out, and think about this throughout the day after you listen to this or you watch this. We're mostly all of the thinking that we're doing, if not all of the thinking that we're doing, is based on what we see in the physical world, or we perceive from the physical world. And when I'm talking about the physical world, I'm talking about, the things that you can literally see: the trees, the walls, the tables, the people around us, the situations that have happened around us with friends, family, co-workers. Excuse me. And which is fine. And it's stuff that we perceive. It's ideas and thoughts that come into our minds and into our brains through our physical senses. Okay? And when I talk about physical senses, I'm talking about touch, I'm talking about smell, hearing, seeing, tasting. And those are physical senses. And that information comes in mainly from the physical world. And that's what we tend to be thinking about all of the time. Most of us learned our thinking through the educational system, or whoever was unable to go through the educational system or left the educational system at an early age may have had the opportunity of learning how to think in different ways. But for the most part, I believe that we have learned how to think in bits and pieces, and we don't know how to put it as a whole. We don't know how to teach it as a whole. I don't think there's very few places in the world, or in through the educational systems worldwide, that actually teach us how to think properly as a whole and understand how to do it properly. Doing this properly will become evident as we continue going through this series, and as I'm able to share more and more information about everything. But as a starting point, let's in allow me to introduce the concept of order and movement. In order for us to have for us in order to us for us to live a successful and fulfilling life, our minds, our way of thinking, need to have order. And in order for us to understand and study certain ideas and certain concepts, we literally need to have an image of those concepts. And what do I mean by that? So let's start with the fact that we actually think in pictures. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to ask you to think of your car. So what do you see in the screen of your mind? You actually see a picture of the car. What if I were to ask you to think of your home? You see an image of your home. So I'm trying to, in a short period of time, very short period of time within this video, trying to prove to you that we actually think in images. We think in pictures. So that's kind of like an introduction on how we're going to rearrange the way that we actually think about thinking and how we can use our thinking more effectively to create the kind of life that we want for ourselves. So if we think in pictures and we need to study something that is very important for us that we don't have an image of, we need to create an image of it. What do I mean by that? Then let me ask you this question. If I just asked you to think of your car, and I asked you to think of your home, and I'm 99.999% sure that a picture in the screen of your mind saw your car and your home. Now, if I were to ask you to think of your mind, what comes into the screen of your mind? See, most people would see an image of the brain, and that is not correct. It's the mind or the brain, it's actually no different than any other part of the body. So the concept here, and this again may sound radical or not to you at this point in time, but the mind is really an activity. I love the way that Bob Proctor puts it. He says, mind is an activity, and the body is a manifestation of that activity. The brain is part of the body. So if I tell you that the mind is not the brain, then how are we going to begin to understand how to work with our minds? We have to create an image of that mind. Now, I'm not going to create that image for you right now, but by creating, maybe at a later stage, probably in the next episode, we will talk about that. And this is something that I actually learned from Bob himself. But I will talk about that at the next time. But what I want to share here is the idea that we need to start creating images of anything that we don't understand or that it's abstract in nature in order to create that order that we need to properly move forward. So order is another law of the universe. It's the first law of creation. That will become more evident further along in time. So we're going to create an image of the mind, but we also need to understand this other concept. And this is what I talked about recently, just earlier in this video, about the fact that we're perceiving our world through our physical senses. So like I said, we see, we smell, we taste, we hear, and we touch. So let's just say this little piece here. I can pass my fingers through this. You can pass my fingers through anything, your fingers, your own fingers. You can pass them through anything that you're touching. And biological, we know that there's a sensation, right? So that sensation is pretty much light messages that are going through a nervous passageway and traveling to our brains and increasing the amplitude of vibration in certain cells that can literally, some of these cells would recognize, say for example, the zipper. This is a zipper. And I understand for the most part that what a zipper feels like. I understand what a smooth surface feels like because I have done it before. Nervous A light message is passing through our nervous system, through to our brain, and it's creating an image of smoothness, or it's creating an image of the zipper. The same thing is happening through sight, through smell, through taste, and through sound. Literally, frequencies or light messages are traveling through the supposedly invisible world. Just because it's invisible, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. You wouldn't be able to hear me right now if there wasn't invisible messages or invisible frequencies or vibrations traveling through the air, going through the camera, and getting to your speakerphone, then your speaker sending invisible frequencies over to your eardrums, they themselves vibrating and sending light messages through your nervous system to your brain, activating images that you already know. All of the words that I'm talking about here right now are words that you've heard before for the most part, and you understand them, you are receiving them through what I call the physical world. So these are just concepts and ideas that I wanted to introduce in this particular video so that we can go further into the study of the mind. So next time I see you all, we're going to create that image of the mind, and from there we're going to move forward into more and more ideas about mindset, because we're going to begin to understand ourselves. I really appreciate this from Bob himself, because he has taught us through in very simple ways how to understand ourselves. And once we understand ourselves, the real inner selves, the possibilities are endless. We're going to be able to understand other people as well, because essentially we are all the same. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I hope that this has been a valuable introduction for you, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.